Chris Kisley, how are
Hello.
you?
I'm good. How are you?
Welcome to Talking Kindness. I'm very well, and this is the first one that we're recording of
Right
Talking
on.
Kindness, and that feels very fitting because me and you have a long history of talking kindness over the last few years. So before we dive into that, let's just give people who don't know you a sense of who you are, where you live, like what you do. Just give us the little bit of potted background of all of that.
Okay. So I live in Atlanta, Georgia. When Adriana, my daughter, was younger, people would ask her, like, what does mom do for a living? And she would say, Mama helps adults get along. And so I would think that's probably what I do. Technically, organizational effectiveness, leadership development, growth strategy for anything from startups all the way to billion-dollar companies. But really, I really do help adults get along with both themselves and each other.
Yeah, and when we spoke recently, you were talking about, so you've been doing organizational development within companies
Yeah.
for many, many years. But when we spoke recently, you were talking about a new idea called relationship. Was it called Relationship University?
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, my best friend and she and I have worked together for over 20 years. And we got together recently and said, what do we want to do in the back third of our career? Like, we've both been in the field for over 30 years, and we want to do something that capitalizes on everything that we've learned and how we've grown and all the work that we've done. And what you realize is that when you go to school, nobody actually teaches you how to be in relationship with each other. And so you learn it from how you grew up and like your peer relationships. And all of us have had both good relationships and bad relationships, but there's not been any process to help us figure out, like, well, are my relationships healthy? Like, and how am I showing up? Is this good? Is this not good? Like, why do I keep having these patterns? And so some people go to therapy, some people go to coaching, and we just want to make it more accessible for people. And
Yeah.
so we have our first class coming out in the fall, which is kind of, the name is to be determined yet, but basically it's all about, it starts with you. So before
Mhm.
you determine anything else about a relationship, you've got to actually look at yourself first. And so we're really excited about it. So there'll be a series of classes.
Well, I'm excited to get involved, and if I was ever going to go back to university, that would be the university that I would come back to, and specifically the modules that you're teaching as well. So obviously we've talked about kindness quite a bit over the last couple of years. And I first started talking to you about this book and we ended up running a program together, Kindful Leadership, which was really about taking a lot of the principles from the book and putting them into working with leaders, putting it into leadership settings and really thinking about how leaders can be kinder, but also how they can create more of a culture of kindness in their work. So just wanted to ask, if you think back to when we were starting to have those conversations, why did you feel like that was work that you really wanted to be involved in? What was your sort of reaction to the idea of working very directly with the subject matter of kindness?
So there are a few things. The first thing is anything that you're involved in and you ask me if I want to do with you, my answer will always be yes. I love you and it's great to work with you. Number one. Number two, kindness is a value of mine. And I know that you and I share that. Number three, I work a ton with leaders and I do a lot of coaching and a lot of team development work. And the true definition of kindness with like truth and grace would solve a lot of problems. Um, if leaders knew how to be kind in a very tactical, practical way. And so I was really excited about doing that work with you.
Yeah, and your definition, I don't know if is it yours or did you get it from someone else? But like that thing of truth and grace is,
Yeah.
I always think that as being yours, and it's in the book saying my colleague Chris Kisley calls it this. Do you want to just dig into that? So when you
Sure.
talk about truth and grace, what do you really mean?
Yeah. So it's the easiest way to say, be honest and be for someone else. And so it's in everything that you do. So whether it's conflict or feedback or listening, coaching, it's about making sure that you're always doing two things and you're holding them like together, which is being honest, being truthful. And truth sometimes is like structure or expectations or standards. It's anything that provides groundedness to be able to come back to be like, hey, this is the truth as we know it here. And then grace just meaning like, what grace means is unmerited favor. And so what it means is being for someone, giving them the
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt, being like, I don't know. I don't really know what's happening. All I know is I can see this thing and I want to talk to this person about it. And because I'm human, I'm going to make a story up in my head about it, but I'm going to try and give them the benefit of the doubt. I think Brene Brown says, create the most generous story about that person you possibly can. So all of that goes to me is like, that's grace. That's like, I am for you, giving you the benefit of the doubt, have no idea what's really happening. Here's how I see it. Let's talk about it. But it's always going to be for your good. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
going to talk to you in anger. I'm not going to talk to you and have some like terrible negative story where I'm going to project a bunch of negative stuff on you. I'm not going to do that. So that's the grace piece. And I think that's really important because you can have really hard conversations, but if you are grace-based in the conversation, you can get through them.
How do you teach when you're working in businesses and you've worked in some very big businesses over there in the States, right through to with founders and
Mhm.
entrepreneurs just starting out. But how do you get people to be able to deliver that grace and have a skill to that in terms of the way they're communicating? And also, like, can you teach people to change that story and be more optimistic about people and give people the benefit of the doubt? Like, if people are generally a bit cynical, can you change their mind to be more believing in people and being for people?
So I don't think I can change somebody's mind necessarily, but I can definitely put doubt in their mind about the way that they are seeing another person. Just to give you an example, if we're talking and the person said, well, this person did this or this person is this way, what I can say is like, well, what are the 6 other reasons the person could have done that? Right? So tell me like, and I walk people through a practice of, okay, it could be that. The thing that you think it could be. But like give me at least 3 other things it possibly could be. Everything from the best version of that person to the worst version of that person. And so create doubt for them that cynical version is the right version. And
Mm,
they're wrong. I just say like, but what if it could be one of these things versus this thing you've decided? And
yeah.
so there's that. The other thing that we will just talk through is like, hey, from a like straight business, like straight bottom line thing. If you try and talk to someone in this way, it's empirically proven that if you talk to them with a negative bent, with a skeptical, cynical, critical bent, they will be defensive. They will not believe you
Mm,
are for them. And therefore, all of this is proven. It's how our brain works. Our brain moves away from pain. And so if you and I are having a conversation and the way you're speaking to me is causing me pain, I'm not going to listen to you. Like I'm going to
yeah.
shut. And so from just literally bottom line perspective, how's that working for you? Like it's not going to make you successful. So if you want to be successful as a leader, just even trying to think about how might I want to talk to someone so that they receive it and will do something with it. And so I can go everything from helping people who are people oriented, talk to them, to people who are very data driven and be like, okay, well, let's talk about the brain science. Here's the brain science behind it. So really kind of all the way across the board, there are different tactics to help people think about things differently.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing I was trying to do a lot with the book as well, was to make the first half of the book, which is very research driven, and there's a lot of science and a lot of studies in there, but to really start out from a place of here is the book the cynics need to read, thinking that a lot of the time people who are less cynical will buy the book and give it to their bosses who are more cynical and that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
just starting out from that viewpoint of, whether you intrinsically believe in kindness as a value, it's kind of irrelevant. Like, if you don't believe in it, it's still a way of behaving that will just make everything around you more successful, right?
Yep.
So who doesn't love that? So I just think that's a really important one for me, is like, recognizing that people do come at this from different viewpoints. But I think certainly, when we did Kindful Leadership, and I'm really excited to do more Kindful Leadership stuff next year with you as well. But when you think back over the couple of times that we've run that program, were there any interactions or any particular things that stood out for you as like, that was the moment, that was the thing where you really felt it kind of hit the spot, or just like any kind of reflections from running that program together?
So there's not some like one specific thing, but my reflection is that people really want to be kind.
Yeah.
Like they really do. They may not have all the skills that they need. So if we're thinking about like just being honest and being for someone else, they may not have all the skills they need to like deliver good feedback, to engage in a conflict. So, but I think most people want to have good relationships. They want business environments to actually be healthy and to be happy. Like we spend a third to half of our life at work. And so why would we not want that? So it's one
Yeah.
of those things where I think sometimes we can get cynical and think like business is all bad and like there's all this negativity. Everybody that we had on the program, they struggled with different things, but they really
Mm,
wanted to shift to thinking in this way and having the skills that they needed to be able to apply what they were thinking and how they were feeling. So,
yeah.
not that I'm surprised. I mean, they signed up for the program, but even people who are just genuinely nice people struggled to be kind. Like they struggled, right? Like, and so I think we all have that struggle. It's universal to us.
Yeah. One of the things that There's a couple of things for me that really stood out with that. One was, that distinction between nice and kind, and in particular, people who have a very strong instinct towards kindness can sometimes also be the people who don't necessarily have great boundaries. And I put myself totally in that position too, where it's like, because you want to please people, because you have an instinct of optimism and really want to see the best in people, sometimes you can either sell yourself short or you don't create the right kind of expectations around you and boundaries around you. And so that was really fascinating, because I felt like with both those times we ran the program, I'm learning as much from that group as what we're teaching and facilitating with them as well. But yeah, I really felt like I learned some good stuff around boundaries when we did that. And that nice versus kind, kind of distinction, I think it's a really important one. I think that phrase of, it's definitely that phrase in the book, which I think was coming up when we were doing the program, which is that thing of nice is telling people what they want to hear, and then kind is telling people what they need to hear, which is really illustrates your whole thing about being for the person and really kind of being committed to, if you're giving someone some feedback, like being committed to their growth rather than being committed to what's the thing that keeps the peace in this moment and doesn't create tension. It's a very brave thing often, I think, to be kind. The other thing that really struck me, and I wanted to ask you about this, was when we ran those programs, it felt like kindness became like a Trojan horse. It was like we got into very deep discussions about, people's emotional trauma and the meaning of life and, what people want to leave as a legacy from their work, and very, very deep questions. And it really felt like part of that was, I think, the people who showed up to that course were predisposed to kindness. So they were already supporting each other and listening, perhaps more than the average. Certainly it felt like it happened, the group bonding happened more quickly, and there was more gelling, there was more listening than I've had on any other programs that I've done. And maybe that's because people are showing up with a predisposition to kindness. And then like the second part of it was like, I wonder whether just the subject matter of kindness itself is a bit of a Trojan horse into some deeper questions around what does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to have values or do great work. So I just wondered if that was something that you thought about, and this idea of kindness as a Trojan horse to get into the deeper meaningfuls. Is that something that you've really thought much about?
I think it's great insight. I think one of the main things is that kindness actually creates psychological safety, which you talk about in the book. So part of what happened
Yeah.
was we come together and we're having these like really good conversations, but it's also creating this safe space, like this space where people actually felt like they could say, "Hey, I had this problem. Hey, I was dealing with this thing. This is this challenge I'm dealing with at work." And so the conversation of kindness leads to having depth-based conversations just from the creating that safe space. I think the other thing is that when we think about kindness, we it typically will pull up a memory for us, either good or bad, and
Mm.
it's usually on the deeper side, right?
Yeah.
So we remember a time when someone was kind to us, or when someone we felt was really unkind, or a time where we have felt like we did an act of kindness or someone did an act of kindness for us. And so it's typically associated with a memory that's relatively deep. So
Yeah.
I think kindness, the conversation of kindness is a catalyst for deeper, broader conversations.
Mm. Um, I feel like asking you just off the back of that, when you think of kindness, is there a memory for you? Is there a deep memory for you, either of a role model for kindness or a role model for unkindness in terms of your own experience?
Yeah, I'd say so. My best friend Barbara is one of the kindest people I know. Um, she will check in on, so if there's something big happening, she always is the initiator of checking in to see how I am, what's happening, what do I need. But if I say, as I shared with you, I had a friend pass away over the weekend, and she's the first person I called,
Mm.
and she has asked me every day since then, like, how are you doing? How are you doing? And it's just a quick check-in. It's just this thing, like a quick check-in. So I said the first day, I was like, thank you. And like, I don't have any words. I can't even get anything out. I felt like I was in a daze. Well, by the second day of that, she's like, you're isolating. Like, and she knows me, 20 years of knowing me.
Mm. Right.
She basically, the truth in this was, you're starting to isolate yourself. And I don't care what words you have, they don't have to make any sense. Just get on the phone with. I just want to make sure you're okay. And she's like that.
Mm.
She knows when I go hide, but she doesn't let me. And she'll tell me, hey, you're doing that thing. I need you to come back over here. And so she's really honest with me, very truthful. If I do that when she and I are arguing about something, she'll say to me like, hey, when you do that, it hurts me. I'm standing over here wanting to be in this relationship with you, and you're isolating yourself and you're basically walking away from me, and that hurts. So she's very honest about not only like my behavior, but also how she's feeling, if
Mm.
my is directed at her or if she is worried about me in any way, shape, or form. So like there's that love constantly, right? She's always sending out that care, and she'll like snap me up and be like, come back here, dude. Like, what do you do? Um, so I think about her. And then I think about just other people that I know that I work with, that I coach, that are gracious, they'll lean into those tougher conversations. Um, they're always checking on someone. They're aware, very aware, very present.
Mm,
Barbara's the first one who comes up for me because she's
yeah.
in each other's lives consistent.
Yeah, and I just think it's really important to have those kindness role models, right? Like just you know, I mean, either to have a person like that and, I know you come from a Christian background as well, and even just that little bracelet of like, what would Jesus do? I mean, it's just, I've got a friend who's from not far from you, very devout Christian. I don't share his religion, but I really respect that guiding question that he sort of brings to his morality with everything. It's like, okay, well, what would Christ do in this situation is how he would say it. Just think about it like that. And it, like, I think having a really positive kindness role model is a really powerful thing, and recognizing that we can be that kindness role model for others, I think is also a very, very powerful thing.
I think too, if you're not like we talked about this a little bit earlier today, is I'm not a huge talker.
Mm,
I do a lot of listening, and I love people, and I'm super curious, but I do think you can role model kindness. So let's say diversity, equity, and inclusion, right?
yeah.
I think we can do a role modeling versus talking, and it has a really big impact. I'm not going to say bigger impact. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying for some of us, we're on the um less talkative side. And if you're on the less talkative side, your actions speak as loud as people who are more talkative. So you need both.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being a role model, to your point, is role modeling that behavior is really important.
Love it. Just before we finish, is there anything you would like to say just in terms of like your hopes for this book that I have coming out and for our work around Kindful Leadership? Is there anything
Yeah.
you want to just put out into the world in terms of your hopes and intentions for this work that we're doing together?
I want us to be able to make kindness tactical and practical. So I think sometimes it feels esoteric to people, and I
Yeah.
think you've done an amazing job in the book of making it really practical. And I'm excited for us to work with leaders, both nonprofit, for-profit, government, faith-based, like whoever wants to come into this space, to make kindness a very actionable value.
Yeah.
Because I do believe people want to be kind. They just don't always know what it looks like, and they don't always have the skills. And I think we can actually help with both. So I'm psyched about that.
Me too. Chris Kisley, thank you so much for being on Talking Kindness.
Thank you.